Yeah, as promised, Danielle, Shay, it's Monday, so we get to get a little bit of a forecast as to what is happening in the week. It's Danielle Shay, VP of Options at Simpler Trading, back with us again for, as I said, a bit of a forecast here, but it's going to be not as busy as last week on the earnings front, but still obviously some huge monster names to come. I want to get to that in a sec, however. We'll talk about Apple and AMD, but let's start things off with this banking note that we get this morning again. At the end of last week, I mean, we talked about it a little bit when you were on last Monday, but at the end of last week, it looked like we were going in this direction as far as Thursday, Friday was concerned for FRC. And then this morning we get this note on JP Morgan. There's a lot of people I saw right away kind of cautionary on this as to what it might mean going forward with relation to the rest of regional banks specifically. But give me your take here on this, JP Morgan picking up the pieces for FRC.
Well, I have a couple things to say about this. Number one, if you look at the overall indexes, I mean, they haven't even blinked, right? It's the third bank failure. Nobody cares by now, right? That to me is just craziness. So that at this point is just, I guess, priced into the market. There is no more fear. You have the VIX down below January of 2022 levels. But when you look at JP Morgan in particular, I mean, we had talked earlier in the season about how JP Morgan is my favorite bank. I think it's the best of the big banks. I think that their leadership overall is very strong. I think that they're really the best stock as far as, trading and then also investing longer term as well. So I'm not really surprised that JP Morgan picked up the pieces here. I am a little surprised that the indexes weren't demonstrating any kind of fear. But hey, I don't think this is over, but in good news for us, it looks like the market is done panicking about it.
Yeah, it seems like the story goes on. It would appear, I guess, the second or third time around in this case, everyone just kind of shrugs it off. Let's do that then and move on. Let's talk the Fed, because it's going to be a big week, obviously, for the overall market. Specifically, let's focus on the NASDAQ with interest rates in mind. It looks like, again, today we're above 90% as far as a chance for a 25% hike once again. Do we finally hear some sort of talk toward maybe a pause? And if so, what are you buying first, Ms. Shay?
I would hope so. And I would hope that the Fed would pause after another bank failure, but they didn't last time. So, I think they seem to be a little behind. When you're looking at the Fed this week, I do think that this is a week that we can look at and we can say for the first time, it doesn't really, to me, evoke the fear emotion, because it seems to me like we're pretty much expecting that 25-point hike. We're pretty much expecting that to be the last one. So I don't think that there's any major, risk of like a half-point hike or anything like that. I think if anything, we could get a good upside surprise. For example, maybe if they didn't hike, or if they say, hey, guess what? This is the last time. The data has been coming through, yada, yada, yada. So I think this time in particular, I'm erring more on the side of it could be good news. With the VIX as low as it is, we've gotten through a lot of these major tech earnings reports. The market's holding up really well. I'm crossing my fingers that we can get some continued upside. As far as what I want to buy, definitely looking at a lot of the tech stocks. I mean, I did buy some more Amazon. I bought some more Google. I think that, comparatively, the NASDAQ is still down, more than the S&P and more than the Dow. So I was picking up some more QQQs. I would love to see the semiconductors continue trading higher, such as, AMD. Qualcomm's a little shaky right now, but I am going to be buying some more AMD as well.
Yeah, mere 4.5% today for NVIDIA as well.
Yes.
Just an absolute monster. So I want to get to AMD in a second here, because overall the market's been, just stuck in this really, really tight range going into what would appear maybe, hopefully, this week when we get, some sort of resolution possibly to the upside or downside. And as you said, it's going to be more maybe about, the comments that come along with it, the interest rate decision on Wednesday, not necessarily the interest rate hike itself, but will they actually point towards maybe that being it? We're seeing, I just noticed before you came on here, yields back to day highs, 10 years at 3.5, the 2 years at 4+. Once again, it's been a while since we've been up this high. So overall, the market seems to think that's going to be the case anyway. But as we said, let's shift focus a little bit. AMD up first this week. Then we get Apple later in the week. AMD not necessarily catching all the headlines this year, but what are you expecting for them?
So, AMD is one where I'd really like to see buyers come in. I mean, it had an amazing run a couple of years ago. And then, of course, last year was pretty rough on the stock. But if you look at the fundamentals, I mean, they're very solid. The company's beat earnings 12 quarters in a row. The last 2 quarters specifically, they had very strong moves. We're starting to see that stock, shift into a bullish pattern again. So I'd really like for these earnings reports to come out and for investors to say, hey, guess what? Yes, the stock went a little bit crazy a few years ago, but this is a good company and there is reason to buy it. It's not, a teledoc. So I like AMD. I'm going to continue investing in it here. And I am going to trade the earnings report as well. I was thinking of probably selling some put credit spreads. It's typically what I like to do with that. As far as Apple is concerned, I'm an investor in this company as well. So I do own longer term shares that just kind of sit there that I don't, trade in and out of. And I will trade it also. Apple's a little bit more dicey for me because last quarter in particular, their earnings report was pretty weak. I mean, they missed EPS estimates. They came in lower in every single segment. They definitely were being hit by the overall macroeconomic conditions. I mean, people aren't going out and buying new iPhones and iPads and, stuff like that when they're being crushed by inflation. So it is a problem for Apple. But what's great about that stock is that even though EPS numbers weren't really great last quarter, the stock has still continued trading higher the entire quarter. And we're now, 10% off of all-time highs. So it's one of those things where I think that investors can look at the stock and say, hey, you know what? Times are a little bit challenging right now. They might come in a little bit on the weaker side, but we're still going to keep buying the stock because it's still a good long-term buy.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk at the beginning of the year. I mean, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of talk at the beginning of the year as to which area of the market may, lead things back to the upside. And it looks like, we've just resumed same old with big tech trying to, at least at this point. I was just double checking. We are still below, 175, that 170, 175 area for Tesla. I want to get your take on Tesla here as well as we head into a new week. There wasn't really much in the way of news catalysts once again today for it, but trying to stay positive here late in the day. What are you thinking this week for Tesla?
All right, let me see. I got to check out my charts on this one because when you're looking at the Tesla chart, longer term doesn't look good, right? On the weekly chart pattern, we've shifted, we've broken down. If you switch over to a daily chart, this last move that we had, we broke down on, it was the 5th of April, where we broke down below the 50 simple. That's where we really shifted into an overall bearish trend. However, I will point out some areas of Fibonacci support that I have. When you look at this current swing that we're in, okay, the high from March 31st down to the recent low 3 days ago, that move was almost exactly the same as the move we saw from February 16th down to about March 13th. So after that February to March move, we had a pretty big pullback, but then the stock was able to trade higher again. Right now, we had a pretty big pullback. Is it going to be able to trade higher again like it did just recently? Yeah, it's a little dicey here for me. And we're sitting at this 155, about 150, 155 area of support. The way that I'm looking at this is, I've got a Fibonacci buy set up. It could possibly be traded up into, let's call it 169. But honestly, in the longer term, it's in a downtrend now. And if it breaks that small support zone that I have between 150 and 155, that's a flush zone right there. If it breaks that level, I mean, at that point, you're down to 140, maybe even 130, because there's just no support left. That's like the last line in the sand that I have. I heard the guys talking about them wanting to short it. I definitely think it makes sense to short it, especially on a shorter term time frame, especially now that it's traded up into 165. So I don't know. I hope you're able to follow all of that. But in summary, it's on the last zone of support that I have. And if that goes, it's going to be sad.
Yeah, it's, I mean, you make a great point. Below that 170, it's clearly lower lows and lower highs versus the opposite direction, unfortunately. A lot of people hoping and cheering maybe for Elon and Tesla to get back above that. I think we got to really get back above and stay above that 170 before we can say, it's reversed once again and going back to the upside. Great stuff. Big week to come, obviously, with the overall market. More big-time tech earnings to come as well. Danielle Shay's VP of Options over at Simpler Trading. Have a great week.
Thank you.